Hey YouTube fans, Eric Hayden on the road, not in my home garden. I'm up visiting my parents. The point of this video is to talk about when things go awry in the garden. I do these videos to really show you what works in the garden, what doesn't work, positives, negatives, any issues I have. I think one issue with rose growing is folks may see ideal and may think that it's easy or it's something that you don't have to work at. And when in reality, it can be difficult at times to grow roses. With that said, sometimes things crop up and it is what it is. Do the best you can and then move on. And roses are pretty hardy. Will you get black spot? Will you get certain diseases if you neglect them? Yes, but they're strong, they'll come back. So if you have any setbacks, please don't let that discourage you in the garden. So that's why I'm showing you this, is to encourage you and to show you that if you have some issues in the garden, it's not that it's not correctable. So if you saw my parents' garden last year, I was up here. I can't believe it's been a year, but with everything going on, and they actually visited back in the winter. It's been about 6 months since I've seen them, but a whole year since I've been at this garden. The last video you saw up here, we talked about deer being an issue, and this fence has been up for about 4 years, so that's certainly positive. They're not having any issues with that. What they are having issues with, unfortunately, they've had some health issues the last year, so they haven't been able to get out into the garden at all. So I came and when I visited, I saw a tremendous amount of weeds. You can see some of these weeds are taller, almost as tall as the rose bush. So the point of this video is to talk a little bit about what do you do in this situation where you are just overgrown with weeds. You haven't been able to get out there because of health, family reasons, whatever the case. It's not a loss. This happens to all of us. Maybe we're away on the road traveling for work. Maybe we have some stuff come up with the family. Maybe we're not healthy. So what I'm going to show you is one easy way, and to re-emphasize, planting far enough away is an important thing, because that allows you to do what I'm going to do today, or started yesterday and finished today. These plants, these roses, are planted far apart, and that's good because it allows airflow through them, so that will reduce disease and pests. But also, if you need to get in there and do any weeding, you have a lot of room to work with. So I started this yesterday, then I had to run out and get more gas, so I'll finish today. I started weed whacking the roses down. You got to be careful. You certainly don't want to get close to the bush themselves because they can injure it. I did unfortunately get one cane of the Dublin, so not perfect with it, but it cleared out a tremendous amount. All this was weedy yesterday. Real tall weeds, again, as tall as these over here. And I'm gonna go ahead and finish that. So point number one, it's not a lost cause. If your garden gets away from you, just do the best you can and try to get at it as soon as you can, but it's not a lost cause. Number two, by planting these roses far apart, I can get in here and use the weed whacker to clean up. So I'm gonna do that here in a second. The other point is, a lot of these are exhibition roses, so they're having some issues with black spot. They have not been sprayed at all this year. But this is for the new rose grower. Grow roses that are more disease resistant, and you won't have as much of an issue. Look at these leaves. They haven't been sprayed at all, and they don't have hardly any black spots. So when you're growing roses, this is why I encourage you to join the American Rose Society, join your local society. They can get you hooked up with what grows well. If you start with a rose that is hardy and disease resistant, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have any issues. It just means that it's going to be a more successful variety for you, so that you're not spraying all the time, or if you can't get in the garden, it'll still be okay. Case in point, it has some black spot on it, but this Elizabeth Taylor, look at the growth on this. This is taller than me. This is without fertilization and without anything in terms of spraying. And the other one that does have some black spot on it, but it's growing quite tall. It's over 8 feet tall. It's an old garden rose, Yolande de Aragon. So it's a nice growing rose. So again, just to recap, we're going to do a little weed whacking here. Plant your roses far apart so they're easier to weed, less disease pressure. If the garden gets away from you, just do the best you can. You know, nobody's garden is perfect. We're all dealing with different issues. What I'm gonna do once I weed whack this, very carefully, I didn't weed whack all the way to the ground. Notice how I left some of the leaves. I'm going to very carefully spray Roundup. Calm winds today. I've got a cone on it because you don't want to get anywhere near your roses with Roundup. And this is kind of an emergency situation. So these weeds that are around the rose, I'm just not going to worry about that. We can hand pull those later. But this wide area in between the roses, that's where I'm going to spray Roundup. This wide area in between the roses, spray with Roundup. Then here in the next week or two, they'll be in pretty good shape as we head into the fall. So I'm gonna fire up the weed whacker and we'll get started. We're gonna start to hack the rest of this garden and get this cleaned up. You'll be amazed at the difference. I should have taken a video yesterday because this whole garden was full of weeds about 4 to about 7 feet tall. All right, we finished up the weed whacking. In the afternoon, I applied the Roundup. One thing I should mention, Roundup, again, don't usually advise that near any plants, especially things like roses, even tomatoes. They tend to be very sensitive to herbicide damage. So you usually don't want to spray that around your plants. I'll say that usually hand pulling, using a hoe, using a pre-emergent to prevent weeds, those are all better solutions. However, sometimes, you know, you have to do what you got to do. And we had mentioned that this garden was pretty overgrown with weeds, again, with the health concerns of my parents. So it's looking a lot better. You might say, well, Eric, there's a lot of vegetation still down on the ground. That's by design. When I used the weed whacker, I didn't get close to the roses themselves. So you'll see that there are some weeds near the roses. I didn't want to get too close with the weed whacker itself or the Roundup. So in between the roses, you can see these are looking pretty bad already. I took them down low with the weed whacker. I still left some vegetation because I wanted the herbicide to get into the plant itself. If I took this all the way to the ground and I didn't have any greenery to spray, it wouldn't be effective. So that's why I did that. So things are looking a lot better. I'm gonna get my parents to send me a picture here in a couple weeks. If I get up early enough tomorrow, before we hit the road back to North Carolina, I'm gonna do another round of Roundup. It's not necessary, but since I live about 7 hours away, I won't be back for a while. I wanna make sure I get this as well as I can. And again, you can see the green weeds where the roses are. That's where I did not weed whack, did not spray Roundup. And then where I weed whacked and sprayed Roundup, it's already looking pretty nasty looking for the weed, which is good news. I mentioned you can tell a lot by the lack of maintenance. Some roses, again, these have not been sprayed, watered, fertilized. It's okay. You don't have to have the perfect garden. Look at this new growth. This rose bush has less black spot than I have back at home. So again, don't get too hung up on perfection. Strive to do the best you can. If things come up, they come up. Smaller blooms, but that's Hot Princess. Speaking of Hot Princess, this is one that it doesn't have a lot of leaves on it because of the black spot, But again, we're talking, I'm 6 feet tall and this one is just above me. So this is over 6 feet tall. You can see the sturdy, big canes. So Hot Princess, that's one that's growing well in the garden despite the lack of spraying and also the lack of fertilization or water. Here's another Hot Princess. I mentioned this already before. This is Elizabeth Taylor. It's an older rose, again, well over 6 feet tall. Shug, that's an exhibition rose. That's growing pretty well. I mentioned in the back is Yolande de Aragon. That is a old garden rose. I think it's from 1843. And again, the newer foliage does not have black spot on it, and it's actually looking better. So that's it in the garden. We'll let this kind of sit overnight. We'll see what happens. When I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to again spray this whole area with Roundup again, just to give it another good dose. And if you saw the video last year, it's about a year, it was, I guess, June 2019, put it up, the deer fence. That's certainly doing well as well. As always, subscribe to the YouTube channel when you can. Share it with friends. All these different ideas in the garden. It's good to share new ideas and what folks are doing in the garden itself. Take care, everybody.